Hello everybody, welcome to my Wine with Jimmy channel. Thanks for stopping by. So I am Jimmy Smith, and on these series we are looking at explaining wine terminology. So there are some very key wine terminologies which will be used across these syllabuses that I teach. So WSET, for example. So they are used across level 3 and level 4. So they are really useful, these short presentations, for those of you studying your WSET level 3 and level 4. As always, if you have any comments, questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to get in touch. You can do so via the social media that you see at the bottom of every slide, or of course you can get in touch via the website. That's www.winewithjimmy.com, where you find my e-learning portal, which I'll talk a little bit at the end of the presentation. Or of course you can comment on this YouTube video below. Please make sure you click the subscribe button for 2 video updates per week. Okay, so let's have a look at vine age. So this is really discussing young and old vines and what that means in terms of the vineyard, but also then in terms of labeling. So we're going to look through a short presentation to give you the confidence to understand the concept of vine age. Okay, so our first slide, here you go. So we have looking here at what's happening in the EU, because there's a picture of a vineyard which has newly been planted with a protective casing around it at the bottom. Actually has a drip irrigation system in place there, of course, as well. So in the European Union, grapes for PDO wines, that's protected designation of origin, that's this yellow and red stamp here. Wines that are destined to be produced as a PDO, so these, of course, are classically DOC, DOCG wines, AOC, DO, etc. These wines cannot be made from fruit that is harvested from vines that are younger than 4 years old. That's what it says up on our slide. Okay, so those vines that are very young will not be allowed to produce wine until their fourth year. In the first 2 or 3 years, it is common for grape growers to remove the inflorescence, the flowers that the vine is producing. So therefore, the energy that vine is gaining every year as it's growing is going just into growth. It's really producing the growth, producing more wood, more structure, instead of producing fruit, because at that point the fruit is not going to be used for wine. So it is actually pointless at that point. Okay, so that's vine age. Now, elsewhere in the world, of course, this is not actually always law. This is just within the European Union. So what are young vines then? What do we mean by young vines? If a grape grower tells you that their wine is made from young vines, what does it mean? And what does it mean if those vines start to mature a little bit as well? Well, young vines, and there's no hard, fast rule at this, but we generally mean young vines are approximately up to about 5 years old. And they typically produce actually quite low yields at this point, because their root systems are yet to fully be established. And this is very obvious. Of course, you're planting a brand new vine, and it hasn't had time to acclimatize and built an affinity with that soil, with the geology there, the terroir. So therefore, the root systems become a lot more stronger as that vine spends more and more years, of course, within that soil. So in the first 5 years, it therefore stands to point that it won't produce a huge crop due to the very restricted root systems that you find. Depending on the grape variety and environmental conditions, between around 10 to 40 years old, so we've got a bit more age behind this now, the vine is able to produce its maximum yields of fruit. Then beyond that age, and of course this is no hard and fast, I'm giving you some generalizations, beyond that age, the vine starts to decrease its vine vigor. So Often many vines will go into a golden age at sort of 20, 30, 40 years old and produce good amounts. But there are varieties in the world that actually start decreasing at 10 or 15 years old. They are not varieties that tend to be exceptionally commercially viable due to the fact that they need to be replanted. A great example that springs to mind is in fact Pinot d'Aunis from the Loire Valley, which it makes wonderfully fragrant, peppery, sappy wines. They're really, really lovely, very, very fresh, very juicy styles. However, there's not much of it left because it's not been a commercially viable grape in the past due to the fact that after a certain age, 15, 20 years, it starts to decrease its yield quite dramatically. So that could actually be a great example there of a vine that we need replanting. We're going to talk through that in a second. Yes, and a grape grower must decide, of course, what point the decreasing yield is no longer profitable. There's also the notion that old vines produce better fruit than younger vines. It's not necessarily true. Younger vines, a young vine planted in a suitable location and trained and trellised well is likely to produce better fruit than an old vine, of course, in an unsuitable location that is potentially badly maintained. So this is actually quite good to understand, because you can find 10-year-old vines, 5 to 10-year-old vines producing very good fruit. Cabernet Franc actually produces quite lovely fruit at a very, very young age, at 5 years even, for example. So it depends on the location, it depends on the site in that instance. Okay. Replantation of vines. We just mentioned that the grape grower may have a decision to replant due to the age of the vines. So very old vines, maybe 50 years or more, may well remain profitable for certain famous vineyards where the wine ideally really collects a very high price. You know, it may be old vineyards in Burgundy or Bordeaux or in the Eden Valley, somewhere, you know, anywhere in the world where the final product is premium. However, in areas making inexpensive or mid-priced wines, medium to high yields are actually needed. So therefore, old vines will have to be replaced, strategically replaced, in order to replace them with younger vines, really to gain the yield behind it. So what about the notion then of old vines and quality? Now, you will hear this very, very commonly around the world, and there is a lot of truth behind it. Old vines in the right conditions will make very high quality fruit. So let's understand exactly why that is. So as I mentioned, often cited that older vines produce higher quality fruit, capable of producing exceptionally well-balanced wines with greater concentration in comparison to younger or, let's say, middle-aged vines. There are a number of theories around this, so let's have a look at our first one. Okay, so of course old vines have spent a fair amount of time in their local environment, so therefore it could be that those vines have become better balanced and also more adapted in their environment. And that's a balance we mean around sort of the aims of canopy management, which you can see in another video. So there's a better balance in the vineyard and there's a better adaptation to that environment. So it's really sort of grown up in its localized environment. Lower yields. So it could be that they produce lower yields, and generally speaking, older vine fruit will produce some lower yields, and that will lead to greater concentration in each grape. The vine's resources are actually shared amongst fewer grapes, so therefore there is likely to be better concentration in each grape. Also, the vines that we're looking at, these old vines, are generally more ancient looking. They are more structured and they have a lot of old wood. And this old wood has more capable storage of carbohydrates, which means that the vine can really rely upon that storage of carbohydrates in the early growing season or when they're stressed. So therefore producing good quality fruit as a result. Also, vine survival. So it could be that these vines are, of course, survived better than other vines over time because they were planted in the most favorable locations, and therefore they've always produced higher quality fruit. And really, it is the grape grower that is likely to keep those best vines for as long as possible, economically viable, before grubbing them up, meaning digging them up and taking them out of the ground and replanting them, of course. But please remember that it doesn't necessarily mean that young vines are all low quality and old vines are all high quality. There are often far too many variables such as clones and rootstocks, irrigation management, canopy management, training, trellising, all of those things to come into consideration. So it's very difficult to make a direct comparison between young and old vines of a particular grape variety or within a particular area. Okay. And then some vine age and labeling examples here. So because of its connotations of quality, of course, the term old vines is often found on wine labels. And you'll see it here on the far right label, Gran Fiore Vielles Vignes. So that's your old vine in Spanish. And then Vielles Vignes in French in that middle label. So both of these meaning old vines when translated into English. This term, however, is not regulated. Therefore, old vines from one producer could be 25 years old, and from another producer it may be 75 years old. So there is a bit of a disparity when it comes to that. Some regions have tried to address this with associations helping to protect and classify their old vines, such as the Historic Vineyard Society in California and the Barossa Old Vine Charter. These classifications, of course, will specify the minimum vine age to be classified as an old vine, for example. The left-hand one, I've thrown in a picture there as well, Vielles Vignes, that this means young vines, and I'm not a Spanish speaker, so I do apologize for the pronunciation, but I do have to switch between several different languages every day when filming these videos, and it is impossible for someone with my ability of linguistics to remember each of the pronunciations. But Vielles Vignes meaning young vines here on the left-hand side from the brilliant Miguel Marinho. And that will be made, of course, from vines at about sort of 6 years old. So they are starting to label with those because people are starting to understand that it's not just old vines that means great quality. Young vines can produce great quality as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video here on the Wine with Jimmy channel. As always, please do pop down your comments in the comment section below. Or you can get in touch with us via social media or by the website. This is the website, winewithjimmy.com. On there, you'll find something called the e-learning portal. And the e-learning portal is an exceptionally useful system, a portal to help you with your studies of WSET. So we have study sections on there for WSET's level 1 through to 4. And you'll find a huge amount of wonderful stuff to give you confidence in your studies. So flashcards, hundreds of them, multiple choice questions, hundreds of them, short written answer questions for things like WSET level 3 and level 4, many of those, revision sessions, and of course, plenty of exclusive video content like this, but much more available to only those of you that sign up to the e-learning portal. Do yourself a favor, go and visit, sign up as soon as you can, and have some happy studying. So I've been Jimmy Smith. If you do find yourself in London, come and see us, please. I have wine bars and wine schools, so you can come and see me for a class, a glass, or a bottle. Thank you so much for your time. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.